I'm Teresa Caraggio, and this is the 1 year anniversary of the idea for Third Paradigm. So I figured this is a good time for a retrospective that updates my What and Why and Who Am I intro video. So in the past year, I have put my book, How to Dismantle an Empire, on Amazon, following Russell Brand's advice to me to dance with the devil but don't go home with him. And then I started this really responding to Russell Brand's luminary interviews on his Under the Skin podcast. And from that, I have gotten some of my favorite, most beloved viewers, including Maria from Australia, Lindsay from Scotland, who gave me the term Sociospirituality to explain what it is that I'm doing, Gan from Maine, Joey from Utah. It's been a delightful way of starting a conversation that allows me to build on all of those ideas that he's been promoting. Over the course of this year, I've created 76 episodes, and only one got removed from YouTube before I figured out not to put data manipulation and vaccine in the description. So those have been divided into 9 different playlists, and I'm going to go through today those different 9 playlists, each of which has about a little over 2 hours, I'd say, of content, 8 videos, and look at what the continuing theme is between those. And then I discovered Substack. Substack is a wonderful platform for writers. It has no censorship. It is direct with the author, and it provides a great way of having comment threads that have coherent conversations and seems to be relatively free of trolls and hecklers. So I started putting my material also on Substack for the last 3 months. On Substack, I subscribe to a number of wonderful journalists and authors who have contributed material that I use in my episodes. That includes Glenn Greenwald, Matt Taibbi, Charles Eisenstein, Rob Bresney, Matt Ehret and Cynthia Chung, Aaron Mate, Caitlin Johnstone, and Robert Malone. And because Substack is a writing platform, it attracts a number of deep readers who have been commenting on my videos. And that includes Jack Sirius, Stan, Marta Latovsky, Margaret Anna Alice, who writes Through the Looking Glass, and Josh Matthews, who writes General Grievance. Let's start by looking at what is the third paradigm. I use the third paradigm because what I'm looking to break are artificial dichotomies that keep us separated. So this is a video blog about socio-spirituality and small-scale sovereignty. Socio-spirituality, as I define it, is looking at the reality in the world with cold, hard facts, and then looking at the reality of the world and questioning that. So I do the first part of that in my book, How to Dismantle an Empire. I go through anthropology to colonial history, through economics and looking at politics and foreign policy, and then go through system change to reimagine how we think about money, and then looking at how we could redesign the money system so that it served us, so that it served community self-governance, which is the portion of that is small-scale sovereignty. Why is this important? I believe that we're living through the greatest consolidation of power in the history of the world. Certainly there have been megalomaniacs, but there's never been the opportunity through technology and science and power and money to dominate the entire world all at the same time. So we're living through the worst of times and also the best of opportunities. I think that things are backfiring, and that when they do, we're going to have the opportunity to put together a plan for what we really want if we know what that is. So my focus is on figuring out what that is and also keeping an eye on how they're doing what they're doing. So my first playlist is called The Great Reset, and it looks at some of the horrific things that have been done, like Operation Melbourne. It asks questions like, are opioids part of this new opium war? It goes through things like Robert F. Kennedy's book and looking at the infodemic, as they called it. And it looks at Yuval Noah Harari and his metaverse. So all of these things tie together in a way that I think we need to figure out the geopolitics of it and what's going on and how it is that we're being manipulated. The next playlist is Geopolitics and Ukraine. Ukraine has been such an education for me. I look at things like Michael Hudson and the economics of the petrodollar in what I call the petropocalypse. And then I look at the West versus the rest and how oil is figuring into this, which may not be exactly the way you think. I go into the deep politics of the 2014 coup in an episode called Escape from Azkaban, Victoria Nuland and Ukraine. And I go into what Zelensky should keep. I have discovered so much about Zelensky and the inner workings of this that I think we all need to know. The third playlist is Propaganda and Censorship. I look at Nina Jankowicz, the warbling warmonger, and even though she didn't last, what they tried to do there is something we need to understand. I look at manufacturing contempt and how that was a strategy to look at psychologically what would increase the hatred. I look at calming the fears of the tyranny hesitant and Norman Doidge's Needle Points essay. I look at Are We Being Manipulated with Paul Kingsnorth, and then Conspiracy Theorist as the New Heretic on Brad Evans, and then looking at the demonization and demonetization of disinformation with Brett Weinstein. The fourth playlist is Politics is Division. And I look at it as a way that pits us against one another so we don't come to realize that we really want the same thing. In it, I look at Noam Chomsky as an example of that. I look at Roe versus Wade and whether that was a leak or a distraction. I look at Thomas Frank and populism and whether populism was really coming to an agreement on the policies, not the people. I look at the ideological ways in which we've been kept divided in episodes like Need, Greed, and the 3P, or The Only Deadly Sin, or 6 Levels of Reality. And then I look at some history of how whites were trashed in Appalachia. And then I look also at the war on burqas with Sam Harris, the myth of the humanitarian war, which was probably a precursor for Ukraine. To bridge the two halves from the reality in the world to the reality of the world, I go into sex, money, and power. And that includes, on the sex side of it, the lust frontier, disposable dating and the great isolation, to sex and power, looking at anthropologist David Graeber versus psychologist David Buss, and then is our love being pimped for profit on Jocko Willink. I go on the money side into the story of money, which again is David Graeber from my book. And then things like Edward Snowden on the 3 greatest conspiracies in plain sight. I also have Inequality Sucks Out Your Soul on Jason Hickel and Who Stole the Assets on Anwar Sheikh. And just for fun, Jokers on the left, Clowns to the right on Matt Taibbi. The next playlist, SocioSpirituality, has an episode by that name that looks at the rules for developing a new system. It has things more on the spiritual side, like Are you ready to save the world? And when did you stop being wrong? Both of which are based on A Course in Miracles, a book that I've been studying for going on 20 years. And then it looks at some of my favorite episodes, the Epiphany Jumpstart on Gabor Mate, and From FOMO to JOMO, the joy of missing out. The playlist Restoring Local Sovereignty is one I'm going to be adding much more to this year because it looks at how to build a new model. It has things like adjacent nation and we need to agree, and the utopian imagination on Naomi Klein. It also includes things like wokeness versus the void on Kahindi Andrews and Candace Owens, and things that we may want to avoid ourselves. It has one called Virus Vaccine Veritas as the years 2020, 21, and 22, and looks at this as being the year of truth telling, when the truth is going to come out and we need to be ready. The penultimate playlist is Where Are the Women? And I will also be adding to that because I realize that 5 of those videos are me responding to men saying, here's why we need a feminine theology and a feminine economy. 2 of those on Jordan Peterson are The Divine Feminine and Waking the Dragon Mom. And then What Emerges from the Emergency on Luke Kemp, or inner being versus interdependence on Sebastian Junger, and even legal shaman versus economic witches on Yuval Noah Harari. The only woman I could find who was actually talking about a feminine ecology was Vandana Shiva. And so that is From Patriarchal Pyramid to Matriarchal Matrix. And of course, my ultimate playlist is on ultimate reality. So it goes from philosophical questions like what's the best that can happen to meaning is all there is. It looks at whether Tony Robbins is working too hard and aiming too low, and looks at Marianne Williamson and her political radicalism and spiritual optimism. It asks with Daniel Pinchbeck in the matter of all being one. So then it goes into things like the theodicy triangle, something that theologians have debated, to which I'm proposing an entirely different answer. In a sense, this should be the place that you start because whatever you do is only going to be successful if you're understanding reality correctly. And that can give you the fearlessness to be able to look reality in the eye. In this new solstice year of veritas and crisis opportunity, I hope that you join me and my lovely community on YouTube and on Substack. And if you'd like to look at where I was a year ago, here's the OG What and Why and Who Am I? And here's a playlist on ultimate reality because where better to start? Thank you.